Hello, once Forest focus. Nottingham Forest start their season with a 1-1 draw against Bournemouth. We'll discuss that game and hopefully good news on Danilo, plus the latest transfer news as the Reds lodge a £21 million bid for Santiago Gimenez, while Gonzalo Montiel is linked with a surprise return. We'll discuss all that and a little bit more in the company of, first of all, Greg Mitchell. Good to have you with us. How you doing?
Good, yeah. 4 minutes late. It's bang on time for us, isn't it?
Exactly. Spot on. Michael Temple's with us as well. How are you, Temps?
Feeling good, mate.
Good. And good to have back with us after his commentary, the Euros and a bit of a deserved break, Darren Fletcher. Fletch, how are you?
Never better.
Good. As we were hearing before we started recording. Yeah, exactly. Kick us off then, Greg, just into we'll discuss the game and then we'll discuss transfer stuff because it kind of one informs the other. What were your emotions leaving the ground? Was it you gutted that we conceded late on, or did you take the positives from, I guess, mostly the first half? How did you feel?
Well, leaving the game gutted, absolutely good. You can see the positives now, watching it back, seeing the first half performance, how we adapted after the injury was good. But yeah, you walk out the ground like a loss when you concede that late. And the amount of times it happened last season, just like with conceding from crosses and things like that, you thought we'd get rid of that this season. And the first game to concede in the 87th minute or whatever it was just like, not again, come on. I don't know what it is, whether it's a mental thing or because it was pretty much the same team that was playing last year. You think we've got to get better. We've got to get stronger at those last 20 minutes because teams know it. I think we conceded more than any other team in the last 10 minutes of games last season. So teams know our weaknesses, and for it to happen in the first game again, it's just disappointing. But there was loads of positives. You can take a lot from that game, and players that we thought wouldn't play again for us having really solid games like Sangare, like we'll talk about, and Yates coming on and having to push up into more of an attacking role, probably because of Sangare. There's all positives there and some real sharp players, and we're going to get some points, and I think we'll get them quick. But it was gutting.
Obviously, Milenkovic was suspended. Fletch, hadn't served his ban from an Italian Cup game, which is a bit mad. So basically, we had the same personnel that finished last season playing the second half. So was it a surprise to you we conceded? Did you see it coming? Because we couldn't see a clean sheet out last season, so I didn't think we could this season necessarily.
I wrote 4 points down, which I was looking for heading into this season based on the fact Nuno's had a full pre-season and they've had another transfer window. And those points were, can Morgan Gibbs-White take the next step this season and become a player that can be involved in 20 goals potentially over the course of the season, maybe 10 assists, 10 goals. I saw a very similar Morgan Gibbs-White performance on Saturday. Who are the impactful difference makers in the team? I'm looking for significantly more moments from players like that this season. Didn't see a great deal of that. I'm still concerned about where the goals come from. I think it's a lot of a burden to stick on Chris Wood's shoulders, and I look elsewhere and I don't see too many. Midfield looks almost bereft of them. Concerns me. And I look at the game managing situation. We were top of the points table last season in terms of from Forest promotion to the end of last season, points given up from a winning position. And there we were again at the weekend with a lead late on. And there was almost a sense of inevitability that Bournemouth would find a way to score because that's what people tend to do. Milenkovic looks a nice signing in terms of 56 caps for Serbia, 13 million quid, good age, good size. I don't know whether he's a better defender in Premier League terms than Willy Bolly. I'd expect him to be more sturdy than Willy at this stage. I mean, the only issue that Willy has is injury. It's never really performance. So I think it's a nice addition to the squad. But I don't know whether Willy and Murillo might turn out to be the best pair in the early weeks of the season. So I don't know how impactful initially Milenkovic will be. So I have to say that I'm normally the one that comes on at this stage of the season, all guns blazing. Let's be nice and optimistic. I don't think this close season up to now, enough's been done to change it from last season to this season. They still look like a team right now that's going to be nearer the newly promoted clubs in terms of points than the ones in the bracket above, which is where they want to be. I still think they've got to bite the bullet and sign a difference maker as a central striker. I've seen Evan Nilsson over the summer go to Bournemouth, who was being linked with top 6 clubs last season, having had a fantastic year for Porto, not only domestically, but in the Champions League as well. It's time for them now to sign an impactful striker to make the difference. That's what's lacking in the team. The fear factor, I don't think, is there in the opposition. I think they feel that Forest are a team that, in general, they can cope with. And I think they need difference makers now to take this team to the next level. There's still time in the transfer window to do that. And I really hope that they can find players that can fit that mold between now and the end of the month.
Let's talk about Gimenez briefly then, because he's the player that we've been linked with. I mean, I don't know if you've seen much of him, Fletcher, at all. These are his stats in the Dutch league. Obviously shows up really well in the Dutch league in terms of, expected goals, touches in the box, shots, getting shots away, playing for a good club. So I don't know how much you can take from this. Is that the kind of market we have to be pitching in, Fletcher? Because you can't go out and buy a Premier League striker unless it's someone like Eddie Nketiah, who we've been linked with.
Well, I know that Eddie Nketiah will score goals in the Premier League. I don't know whether this player will, because he's never been in there. And for every Ruud van Nistelrooy that comes over, there's a Dirk Kuyt who was 30 goals prior to going to Liverpool and couldn't score. And there's an Afonso Alves who went to Middlesbrough for a ton of money and he couldn't score either. This is not a great market, I don't think, in terms of being certain that a striker is going to come and score goals. You can counter that with Luis Suarez, who did fantastically at Liverpool. But I think it's 50-50. It's not the greatest standard. When you get below the top 2 in the league, it's not a great standard. So you would expect strikers of note to score goals in that division. So while that wagon wheel looks nice in terms of where the figures are, whether that translates to the Premier League remains to be seen, because it hasn't always. And the fact they've not gone out and bought him, because it is a relatively good fee for a striker if you're completely confident in what he's going to do. The fact they've not gone and done it by now will tell you that there are probably internal doubts as well as to whether he's a certainty or not. And I think what they've got to do now, they can't keep taking chances. They can't keep trying to catch lightning in a bottle. At some stage, you've got to go and sign a forward who you're really confident is going to score goals for you and can then make a difference. Fulkrug going to West Ham, I think, is a no-brainer. Great track record in Germany, great track record for Germany in terms of goals to game. Not overly expensive in a striker market that's always inflated. And I think you can look at him and say, well, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I can do it with a lot of confidence. He's going to make my team better, and that's fine. And I think Forest need a forward like that they know they can rely on, and they know that they can almost stick an asterisk next to that individual's name and say they're going to be good for 15 or 20, or maybe somewhere between 15 and 25. And then everybody else in the team can worry about where the rest of the goals are going to come from. So I don't know about him. I've not seen enough of him. I wouldn't be confident to say, sign him. He's going to come and score goals in the Premier League, because I've seen players come from the Eredivisie who don't, and I've seen players who come who do. So I just think there's a risk associated with a player from the Dutch league.
Just on Gimenez, 23 years old, 23 goals, 6 assists last season, 2 goals and 1 assist in 2 games this season. Lots of reports saying we've had a bid of around 21 million quid rejected, final looking for about 30. So that's where we're at with that. What's your take on the game and what Fletch said there, Temps, just around, how it shook out overall?
I think when Forest play well this year, because the wingers have a big role to play in it. I like what Callum Hudson-Odoi did. He just went and sat on their fullback and said, mark me, I'm going to play like a luxury player. I'm going to have chalk on my boots and stand in the line. And if you're going to try and attack, I'm sticking where I am. And off the back of that, we manufactured a lot of ball to Callum in the first half. He looked really dangerous. I'd go so far to say that rather than being Morgan Gibbs-White's team on Saturday, it looked like Callum Hudson-Odoi was set up to be the focal point. What happened when we lost him and Elanga earlier was that threat kind of dissipated, and there wasn't the depth on the bench to give any kind of threat out wide. And Bournemouth were good value for their equaliser in the same way we were good value for the goal in the first half. So my concern is depth out wide. I think any striker would enjoy the service they're going to get from the different threats of Hudson-Odoi, Anthony Elanga, and Morgan Gibbs-White when he's playing to form in that 10 spot. Sangare was improved for me. I think he had 5 tackles in the game, and you could see how disruptive he was, breaking up play and playing more akin to the manner in which we need him to be. But Danilo will be a loss. He is a a dynamic player. Offers a bit all over the park, can do the defensive duty, but plays that forward pass more quickly. His range of passing is bigger than Yatesy, who did very well when he came on. It was a really, really credible performance. But for me, that's a blow. Hudson-Odoi is the key to this team at the minute, and we do need to complete this signing of a talismanic number 9, because while we know what Taiwo and Chris Wood are going to do, I'm not convinced they're the men that are going to get us 12 points beyond where we were last season.
400 people plus with us. Do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. That'd be great. It does make a big difference. Did the first half kind of show what we could be, Greg, and then the second half show what we kind of are? We took a step back, I think. I don't know if the subs were wrong or if the mentality was wrong, but we ended up getting deeper and deeper, and it showed our frailties, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to give him some slack, because the sub seemed forced to me. There was some knocks and obviously a clear injury that had to happen. But I think the bench is a lot stronger than it was last year. Anderson looked really sharp when he came on. I think he's going to be a starting player for us. And it shows him and Gibbs-White can play together. But there was talk of Yates and Sangare not being able to play together. But I thought they were great. The way, like I say, it pushed Yates up to a more attacking position. And these forward balls that he's playing a lot more of clearly now. And he's club captain. He got that armband on straight away, and he played like one. So the new signings are going to come in, and they're going to be starting. And I'm sure like players like that, Gimenez will come in. He fits everything that Forest are doing. He's 23. Average age of the signings is 23, isn't it? So you could see a player like him coming in and making an impact. But it is clear, and we knew this all summer, that Wood and Taiwo aren't the answer for an entire season. As good as they can be and they can get goals, we're not going to be able to rely on that week in, week out. They're going to pick up injuries, and we're going to need players there who can take it off. So there's plenty of time left in this window, and we're always active. We're always looking. So I'm sure it'll be fine, but we have got to strengthen. And like Fletch said earlier, I think it's got to almost be that stellar signing rather than just 3 or 4 others to fill in gaps where needed.
What concerns me a little bit is that this is now year 3 in the Premier League, and every transfer window looks the same. There's a lot of depth, quite a high number, all around the same price. And I don't see that necessarily changing. And I think you get to a stage where by now you should have the basis of what you're going to do. And then this window really should be about impactful players coming in and making your 11 better, because you've spent the rest of the time building depth, building the squad, getting the basic groundwork of what you want to look like. And now it's a case of adding those special pieces to actually make the team better. And I've still not really seen that over the course of this window. It still seems very much of, well, we're going to spend 10 to 15 million on a player, and we're going to hope we catch lightning in a bottle. We hope we've seen something that nobody else has, which will only work sometimes. It certainly won't work all the time. You're going to miss on as many as you hit. The ones you hit on, you look a genius. The ones you miss on doesn't cost you a great deal. So I get the strategy. But I just think now, year 3, this should be where you're looking at a team that's survived twice. Now the question has to be, what are the special ingredients now to make the team, the 11, better? And can we go and be a little bit more precise in terms of what we need, lower the numbers, bring 2 or 3 because we've got the basis? But I still haven't seen that. I've seen us sign another goalkeeper and sell one. I've seen a centre-back come in, which was a necessity. But again, it's 13 million. It's in that ballpark. It's someone that we hope is going to be okay in the Premier League, but we don't know. So there's a risk. I look at the wingers that have come in. It's fine. Are they better than Elanga and Hudson-Odoi? Possibly not. Will Elliott Anderson start? Didn't really at Newcastle. Might do. So all I'm saying is that as optimistic as I want to be, and again, I don't think they're going to get relegated by any stretch of the imagination, but I think enthusiasm just has to be tempered again, because in reality, in the cold light of day, who's going to be the difference maker that wasn't there last season? That's my question and challenge until the window closes. Now, that could change. They could go and sign 2 impact players between now and the end of the season. And the counter of that would be, but they've still got Murillo and Gibbs-White, and they might not have done. So that's got to be seen as a plus, provided those two continue to develop. But I hoped that this would be the summer where they were a little bit more focused on an individual or two individuals that would really make that 11 better and put a bit of fear in the opposition. And to this point, I've not seen them come in.
So which part of the 11, obviously strikers one, which areas of the 11 are you looking at where you think that needs improving?
Well, I think right down the spine of the team, you've still got questions. But I certainly think central midfield, you've got to get goals from central midfield if you want to be successful in the Premier League. You've either got to have the best defensive unit in there or you've got to have goals in there. So which of the players is going to step up in central midfield and become a double-figure goal scorer this season? Because that's what they need. You've got to get goals from somewhere. The strikers are going to get whatever they're going to get, but none of the two strikers are going to get anywhere near 25, 30. You're not going to get Ollie Watkins, Dominic Solanke numbers out of what they've got. So that tells you you've got to get it from elsewhere. And they are a team that tends to concede a fair few, certainly from set pieces last season. So clean sheets aren't exactly common. So you look elsewhere, look at the midfielders. Can Morgan get 10, 12? He hasn't yet, but can he? Would Ryan get double figures? Sangari's not getting double figures. Is Anderson going to get double figures? Is Ilanga going to get double figures? Callum might. Are you getting goals from your fullbacks? Probably not. If you just do the maths and look at the team, where do the goals come from? Because you can't win games if you don't score goals. And if you don't put fear in the opposition, because they know you can score against them, then you're up against it from the start. So I just look at the group and I just see a lack of goals in the group from back to front. And that would concern me because that's been the problem from promotion. And I look at the teams that have come up and done well. Fulham were promoted the same year, and on the back of Mitrovic, they had a fantastic year. Bournemouth made strides last season on the back of Dominic Solanke. Aston Villa have got into the top four on the back of Ollie Watkins. And I look at the teams that do make those strides. They've got that out-and-out number 9 goal scorer who they can absolutely rely on week after week after week to be the difference for them. And I think until Forest get that in central midfield and as a central striker, it's always going to be a difficult task whoever they play. They're not really going to go out and have easy games. And I think by this point, third year in the Premier League, there should be some games that you look at and say, fine here. But that's not the case still because of how they've gone about it.
I think the three who played behind Wood were interesting temps. In the first half, like Morgan got quite a lot of stick for his performance. I thought when we were good, he was good. But second half, when we were bad, he couldn't change the game. He couldn't get into it. I guess you're looking for Callum to score 10 plus goals, Ilanga to score 10 plus goals. But Chris Wood had one shot on goal, not on target. So we probably do need to improve the service to him because the first half, like we were really good, but we probably didn't create enough clear chances, did we?
Seemed comfortable middle third. I think at times Morgan was getting on the ball a bit too deep and looking for work, which is what happens when you're not finding the ball in the pocket and trying to get your team on the front foot. Antti Ilanga played a slightly different role. He was tracking his fullback. Moore came off his wing. Moore, as I said at the top of the show, Callum Hudson-Odoi was determined to be an out-and-out left winger and get on that island with his fullback 7 or 8 times in the first half and cut inside, impact the game. 75% of those occasions. So yeah, I echo that. It's tough for Morgan because he wants the ball final third, edge of the final third, and to be the man that's unlocking the door, bringing people into play. And he found himself passing sideways a bit and picking up the ball at greater depth. But that's the reality in a team that is still finding its feet in terms of moving towards central midfield. We are light on goals. I think we scored 49 last season. We're 10 to 15 shy of where we need to be if we're going to make an incremental game in the Premier League. And just analysing the goal that we did score is a bit of a goalkeeping howler from Neto. He's fumbled a Ryan Yates shot, which wasn't particularly venomous, into the path of Chris Wood. And he's done what he does. I think we can safely say that Chris Wood is going to convert chances when they fall for him. He's been extremely efficient, but he's not getting the service which is going to deliver those extra goals on his own. So yeah, I would endorse Fletcher's point. I think we need an additional goal-scoring threat central midfield on top of Morgan Gibbs-White, who has a massive role to play in this side, and a different type of striker. I'd like to see us play the occasional ball in behind, but the profile of striker we have at the minute doesn't allow for that. We've looked for Anthony Elanga quite successful at times when we've seen he's got his fullback or the left-sided centre-half covered and use his pace to exploit that. But if you've got a creative 10 who time and time again is going to be looking for that clip through, that through ball, that threaded one between fullback and centre-half, he needs a different profile of striker to Chris Wood. So the recruitment priorities for me are central midfield and centre-forward.
Yeah, that's where I thought we lost our way a bit second half. Like the amount of times where we're passing it in triangles on kind of the left side of their box between Toff, Hudson-Odoi, not really going anywhere and just lacking that confidence or penetration. I don't know. On Nico, Greg, I thought his performance probably summed up kind of our day. Like first half, positive, going forwards. Second half, he got booked and he looked in real trouble. What did you make of him? Any worries on him off the back of a pretty rough pre-season, or did he show enough first half of what he can do?
He's always positive going forward. That's why I love watching him, because he attacks for us and he attacks so well, but his frailties are in the position he needs to be playing in, isn't it? When he's defending in that corner. And yeah, they seem to, you notice this a bit towards the end of last year, that teams seem to attack through him. They go his side of the pitch, and that is a big worry. But he's a quality player and he's going to create a lot of chances for us. And he's still that starting player in our team. You know, there's not the answer coming in from the bench to replace him, and certainly doesn't need to, in my opinion. I'd still rather see him in the team just for his attacking ability. But of course, there are frailties there, and we've always known that. But I think his quality does come through, and he's good enough in that sense on the ball that we get away with it a lot of the times. But yeah, first half, fantastic. Half time, we were all saying how much better we were, how much we had loads more of the ball than normal. I think we had over 50% of the ball, and we were enjoying it when we had it as well. We looked confident, all the little passes, and it looked great. If you'd have just finished the game at half time, we'd have gone, yeah, we've improved no end. But it was that second half that really did show what we've all just been speaking about, that we need more. We need, one way or another, we need to be able to get out of this thing that we've seen all throughout last season.
I agree with Greg on Nico Williams. I think he's got to be in the team. And I think when you look at whatever defensive frailty there is, I think in a free scoring team or a freer scoring team, that's not so much of an issue. Forest tend to play lots of tight games, don't they? Because they don't put the opposition away. So therefore, any defensive lapse, you're hanging by a thread, hoping that it doesn't lead to a goal. I think all of a sudden, if you're a team that can score the second goal and the third goal and start to enjoy your football, then players like him absolutely flourish, because they can concentrate on what they're good at more than being 1v1 against a winger while you're under siege. So I think the better the team gets, the better he gets. You know, you look at Trent Alexander-Arnold, the best attacking fullback in the world in a team that's doing well. But if you're under the cosh, he's probably the last one you want in a defensive position. So it's not just Nico, but I agree with Greg. I think his strengths far outweigh the weaknesses in what we have now. He has to play. I think he's a really important player for us. And I think if Forest can become a team that's better at taking its chances, generating them first and taking them, he's one of the players in the team that would really benefit from that.
Just take a word for our sponsors at Trent Navigation. Straight after the Wolves game on the 31st of August, Oasis are playing at the Nav, free entry, of course. Barbecue in the food court, outside bars, so you're not queuing for ages. So do get down to the Nav for that, and thanks for all their support as normal.
Can I just say on the Nav, Matt? Pre-match.
Please, I don't think what you're going to say here.
No, it's all good. Of course, it's all good.
I thought you were going to slag me off for getting a VIP card, but go on.
No, I wasn't going to mention it because I know it's a sore subject, but we'll move on from that. But they've opened up that third bar at the back now. It's there's probably 1,000 people in there. Easy to get a beer, brilliant atmosphere. Fothers was there doing the quiz, which was just hilarious. You know, minor hiccup at the end for him, bless him, but it was brilliant. And they've got over 30 members of staff. employing that many people on a Saturday through what they've done, just building and making it
just to keep Greg fed and watered. That's an army of 30 people required.
It was absolutely brilliant. So fair play to him.
I've just had a message from Dave Willens, and he said for all of that, he's still not getting a membership. So that's you. Nice try.
Hey, I've got one. Davis
is the only one with a gold card, and no matter what any of us do, we can't have
one. Going back to the game, embarrassing myself. Thames, I kind of wonder, is that the way we kind of play? Is Nico a case study that our best way is to be positive and be attacking, like we showed first half? And then is it Nuno being, I don't know, his hand was forced to the subs a bit, but we can still be attacking with Dominguez and Anderson on the pitch. And it felt like we kind of, we regressed. Is that on, I don't want to be too quick on Nuno. We've only played one game. I don't want to draw too many conclusions, but, do we have to be positive throughout, I guess?
Nico was derided a bit after we signed him and went to a flat back four, having looked for a Jed Spence lookalike to be that advancing player down the right-hand side. So he found himself having a period of reflection, and he's had to retune to become an effective right-back in the Premier League. I believe he now is. That's why he's getting interest from clubs across Europe. That's why he holds his own in international football. And that's why he's becoming an automatic pick for us. His natural game is to be progressive, is to overlap an effective right winger, is to look to get on the ball and to abandon his post at times. I like what Nico brings. If we had two, Willy Bolly type, head it, tackle, pass it to the centre mid fullbacks, you're not launching attacks in the Premier League. Trent Alexander-Arnold's an extreme case, but the modern fullback doesn't just defend. Nico is very much a modern fullback. So I won't deride him. There are a couple who sat around me at the weekend who we wanted to, but I think that type of player is important. I'd say the same for Olorena. I think he's become exceptionally good in his consistency in the Forest side. He doesn't necessarily want to play left back. He'd rather be on the right hand side, but he's good enough to be effective in either post. The challenge for me is if we have an injury, a loss of form to either Anthony Elanga or Callum Hudson-Odoi, the threat dissipates because the players that were coming on to replace them were not comparable, not in ability, but in the style and the profile of footballer that they are. So it necessitates a rethink away from an effective means of playing football, which establishes as an attacking threat in the Premier League. So interested to see what the new signing can do. We didn't see anything from him at the weekend. Interested to see if Elliot Anderson gets past Ryan Yates. Now this hole has opened up in Danilo's absence for the next few weeks and months, and want to see what we do in the transfer market. I do think Milenkovic, what it's worth, will live with the level. He'll be an improvement on Willy Bolly on the ball. Let's hope he can continue to be commanding in the air and win plenty of ball on the feet. Look at his profile. He doesn't do what Murillo does. He is going to play 15, 20-yard passes to the fullbacks. He's not going to be playing ranging balls or carrying out of defence. We don't need that with Murillo at his side. But the key for me is getting the best out of Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi. And the one thing I'll say on the recruitment policy, I think rightly so, there's a belief from within that the players that we're picking can improve. It's by design to a point that we haven't given anybody a debut in that 11 at the start of play on Saturday. Milenkovic is the exception. He will come into this side in the next game. But it's not a case of playing the same players and expecting the same result. Morgan Gibbs-White's 2 seasons into his Premier League career. Danilo only joined us in January 23. So it's right to expect more from the players that have taken a bit of time to adapt to this level. And I'm excited what several of those names can become. Olorena, Nico Williams, Murillo, obviously, Gibbs-White, obviously, Hudson-Odoi is recapturing what he had previously. Anthony Elanga's played Champions League football. There is reason to expect more from the players already in this side.
Yeah, I think so.
You know what you said about Nuno, Matt, that it's only one game? I think he has 2 massive questions to answer really early in the season. And that is, can this team game manage when they've got a lead? Because that's a key. I mean, did I see a stat the back end of last season on the television that they'd blown something like 60 points with a lead since getting up? I mean, if you average that out over the course of the 2 seasons, they're halfway in the league both times, and they're never worrying about staying up. I mean, they're just comfortable. I mean, that's an unforgivable trait that they've got. They've got to stop doing that because they are good enough to get in front. They're just not good enough to hang on to it. So he's got to solve that. He's got to find a practical way for the team to get the lead and keep it. And we've also got to see whether he's gone away and worked on the training pitch and worked out how they can be better defending corners. So they were the two big weaknesses last season that we don't know. And I think his future ultimately will depend on whether he solved those two issues or not. Because as the coach, it's not always about picking the best team. It's about making sure that whatever the weaknesses are in your group, you can get on a training pitch and get rid of them. So it would worry me at the weekend that, again, they let a goal in late, because that was the problem last season and the season before. But then we've also got to find out whether there are any better defending corners. Now, if the answer is yes, that's not a weakness anymore, and yeah, we do get leads and keep a hold of them, then you can look at him and say he's had a really positive influence on what the issues were. He's gone away and he solved it, and that's great. But if they persist, then I think the leash will be relatively short, because that's going to cost them a lot of points over the course of the season if they've not gone away and sorted those issues out, because they were the worst team in the Premier League at defending corners and giving up leads, and they can't be that again. Otherwise, they're going to find it hard to separate themselves from the newly promoted teams as they did last season. I think they're the two big questions he's got to answer in the opening month or so of the season when we look at the way Forest perform.
Yeah, and I didn't see that much difference in our set-piece defending. It still worried me. Obviously, that was a well-worked goal that Bournemouth scored, but there was a time when they got round the back and Sells made a good save, and I didn't think we'd set up any differently. So that worried me perhaps even more than the late goal, because it was sort of a freak late goal. Toffel probably feel he should have done better, and we should have stopped the cross better. So it wasn't a freak, but it was slightly avoidable, I think.
Joe, I also think as well, as a supporter base now, we've gone from the "isn't it great to be back?" because that was year one, and then year two was we've changed manager, and it's year three now. So I think the expectancy of the group now can be like any other team in the Premier League, that we can now look at it and say, well, they should be better at doing that, and there should be an improvement here, and the player in that position should be able to do that. I think that the expectation levels can increase the longer you're a Premier League club, because you should get fundamentally better. And the two seasons that Forest have had have been very similar. So I think the pressure's on this season for the club in general to pull away. And I think that's what the owner will be saying to the people who have got boots on the ground. I think Evangelos Marinakis will expect a lot more this season than he did either last season or the season before. I think he'll be setting the standards higher. He'll be expecting the coach and the playing staff to be better. And I don't think he will accept another season like he's just had. I think he'd make changes quicker this time. I think people are on notice to a point that he now expects this team to take a step. And if it doesn't, I think you'll see more decisive action this season than you saw last.
I do think Bournemouth are a decent side as well. I should probably mention that. Like, Semenyo was really good, and their forward play was quite fluid. And I give Iraola credit for the way he changed it second half. It must be difficult playing without a striker. They haven't got Evan Nielsen in place yet. So, yeah, they're a decent Premier League side. So it wasn't a disastrous point by any means, but room for improvement. I'm not going to change my prediction that we'll be fine this season based on one game, but I did see good things. I suppose, Greg, as well, obviously the Danilo injury was just an absolutely horrific one, and credit to the players for responding so well to it. Some good news that Danilo, according to The Athletic, hopefully only out for 3 months. I say only, but it looked like it could be a lot worse than that. Do you think maybe we need to go into transfer market to replace him or not? Or are you happy with what we've got?
Well, there's a chance we were already there, really. The rumours were AC Milan and he was going. And so maybe we were already looking at that, and absolutely horrendous what happened to him. I think all of us walking out that ground wouldn't have thought for 1 minute he'd be back at all this season. So if the talk's correct and it could only be 3 months, and that's just incredible. The modern day recovery systems are just unbelievable, what you can go through and then get back on the pitch, because back in the day that could be a career ender. But yeah, we've got, if we weren't already, which I suspect we were, if I'm honest, we have to be looking strengthening that area, whether it's a last minute loan at the end of August or something or like that. There will be replacements, but that wasn't in an area that showed us worry on Saturday when Yates came in and Sangare played behind. They worked perfectly well. That wasn't an area or a situation where it was obvious we needed to strengthen, but I'm sure we will be looking. I mean, we've got an incredible team now. I was lucky enough to go to the training ground the other week, and we had a bit of a presentation on all their data analyst teams, and it was just incredible how they recruit now, and there's nothing that they won't be looking at. Like, it's not like, oh, wake up Monday morning, we better go and replace him now. It's far from that these days. So they'll have a list, and it will just be about activating it now, I'd imagine.
We should just touch on Yates and Sangare a little bit more, Temps, I think, because, I thought it was probably possibly his best game in the Premier League, his most different game, with the way he carried the ball and he played positively. And what did you make of Sangare over 90 minutes? He started really well. Did he tire at the end?
He did, but I'm glad he got the minutes in, because he will get there. And I do accept that the illness, the AFCON disruption, the challenge that he had in his first season did not allow him to fulfill what he's capable of doing. So high hopes for Sangare this season, and I hope he stays in the side. How many times do we talk in pre-season about Yatesy being ready for that opportunity and finding a way to get in that side and stay in the side? Did himself no harm. 95% pass completion. I think he led Forest in that regard. And he's just active, tidy, gets everywhere. Horrible to play against, I'd imagine. Really sharp for the goal. I think the manner in which he anticipated what was going to happen, seized onto it, got his pot shot off, and forced the mistake from Neto is perhaps a little bit underrated. We've said time and time again that if someone can come in and displace the minutes from Yatesy on merit, then great, we'll probably improve as a side. But he's just so versatile, isn't he? He's the Swiss Army knife in this side, bleeds red, and consistently finds a way to play. Look, I think there's always a danger of overanalyzing the first game of the season off the back of friendlies against teams at unrelated levels. But because it's a relatively settled side, because we saw this group of players perform for so long last season, it is fair that we rush to judgments in certain regards while the transfer window is open. I'm excited to see what the South American boys can do. I'm excited to see what Gimenez can do if we get that one over the line as well. And it'd be great, wouldn't it, if all three of those come off, get in the side and make a positive contribution. But it's a point on the opening day from a solid but unspectacular performance. Of course, there's a few things to work on. And one I'd throw back at the fellas actually is the keeping debate again, because Sells had some big moments in that game. But the disallowed goal and the goal itself both showed this kind of inability to defend the near post slightly, maybe a bit of a flap in that corridor between keeper and defender. We got let off by VAR in the first instance for a marginal offside, and then almost a carbon copy goal later on, despite the misfortune of Toffolo clearing the ball into Murillo's face. So I just wonder if there's a bit more to run on that as well. I'm not calling for Sells to be kicked out the side. I think he's been extremely dependable, but there was a certain frailty which reared itself twice in that game. And I just wonder if, with the likes of the quality of Ramsdale out there and one or two others, it's a position that we'll still have half an eye on.
This is your issue, though, isn't it, Temps? And it's a great point that you raise. That again, the starting goalie at the minute was about 5 million quid's worth. The goalkeeper from Brazil, again, is about 5 million quid's worth. Whatever Turner was last season, probably about the same. Connie Moss, who came in, was around the same. You can't take a gamble on that position. It's so important. And nobody knows whether Carlos Miguel can play in the Premier League because he's never done it. We know he's tall and he's from Brazil, and we don't know anything else. And we know that Sells is good in certain situations and not particularly great in others. And we know what Turner's strengths and weaknesses are, etc. Connie Moss is now gone. But there are goalkeepers out there with a proven track record in the Premier League. And all I would say is when they had Dean Henderson in goal, as impactful as he was on the rest of the group, both in terms of character, what he was good at, the ability that he had, he gave you that bit more confidence than maybe others did. Again, I don't think it's necessarily a position that you can take a chance on. And there are people out there that you would think, whether that's Johnston or Ramsdale or somebody else, who could step in and make that position a position of strength, as opposed to a position like others in the team where there are lots of questions. And I think, again, you don't have to break the bank. You could do a loan. I think Chelsea have got 8 keepers. I mean, they must have, among the 75 they've got on the books at the minute, they must have 1 or 2. But what I'm saying is there are keepers out there who won't play, who want to play Premier League minutes for different reasons. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they did it, because I don't necessarily think the long-term answer is at the club at the moment, if I'm honest. I think the goalies are okay, but I don't necessarily think you can stick a line through that position and say everything's fine here. Nothing to say. We're not going to change it. I think that there's every possibility that you could improve it.
Yeah, like a Georgi Petrovic or someone at Chelsea is kind of interesting. I mean, what did you make of Sells on Saturday, Greg?
I think there was mistakes leading up to the goal that created it, wasn't it? So it was tough on him. We're not really pinning it on him, but he didn't do anything to lose his place, certainly.
He's fine, Greg, isn't he?
Yeah, that's the thing. And it was the same last season. We thought we'd kind of found him, but, then we talked about Ramsdale and I thought, Miguel's going to get his chance against Newcastle and he's going to have to do some brilliant saves. It's the only way I see him getting in this team. I think he was always signed as a second goalkeeper, not the starting one, no matter what we thought in the first couple of weeks. I think that's clear already. So we need a bit of a cut run to see what he can do, because I think they're going to be his only chances. And like Fletcher said, it's a position where we need that strength, and Sells can keep going. And the problem is we do make mistakes at the back, so he's got to be able to make sure that they don't let him in, and there's going to be goals, and it always seems to be straight at the goalkeeper when they do go in. So, maybe that confidence behind and that big signing, but there's only so much we can spend. We're desperate for the goalkeeper at however much it'll cost, 30 million, but we're desperate as much, so if not more, for a striker that realistically, that 20 goal a season, guys, 30 million again, isn't it?
Yeah. I think the thing is, though, when you've got a goalkeeper of a certain standard, the issues that Forest have. I spoke to Graham Taylor about this years and years and years ago. I was doing a game with him, and Ben Foster at the time was out on loan, or he was doing, and he was making save after save after save. There was this stat out that he made the most saves in the Premier League, and every time he saw match of the day or whatever, he was making 10 saves a match, pulling everything out from all the corners, and Watford were losing 3-0. I think he might have been at Watford at the time. And I said to Graham, is he an option for Man United because he's on the books and everything else? And he said, the only thing for a goalkeeper when you're at the very top level, he said, you're going to be in games where you don't do a great deal. You've got to be switched on for the moments when they do need you. He said, but the main thing that separates the really good goalkeepers from the average ones is what they do that people don't notice. Where they set people up at free kicks and corners, is everybody in the right slot? How can they influence that set piece in a positive way defensively? Now, I don't know whether Matt Sells is good at that. I don't know if Carlos Miguel's good at that. But what I know is that when you've got a goalkeeper that is, some of the frailty that we see now from corners and free kicks would probably go, because the goalkeeper would see it and he'd be moving people around and he's got the experience to set everybody up. And whether that could be impactful, I don't know. I mean, Nuno's a keeper, so you'd think he'd see it, but didn't solve it last year. So there are other elements away from just being able to make saves that do separate the good ones from the really good ones, if you get what I'm saying. Now, I didn't really understand all of that. He said, but you look at the goalie at the best clubs. You look at David Raya at the moment, or look at Edison at Man City. They're not making save after save after save, but everything they do around the game itself is impactful on what they're doing. So it's just another consideration when you look at who that might be, should they go down that route.
I just want to spend the last 10 minutes or so talking about a couple of fullback transfer chat. Just before that, though, thanks very much to Global Telemetrics for their backing as ever. All of their cars are fitted with a device that means you have a free app that you can use to get push notifications and alerts. For instance, such as the ignition being switched on, it provides you an up-to-date location and status of your vehicle at all times. So if your car gets nicked, they'll tackle it straight away. Fletcher's laughing along at my thing here. People can't see that.
What is happening here?
What do you mean? I'm going to take the screen off. That's his Range Rover that was nicked, by the way, and recovered. So there you go. It's hard to do these ad reads,
What is this?
If Fletch got his car, Nick, you just buy another one.
Yeah, he's probably got.
What is this?
Sponsorship.
You're like one of those American radio shows where they're sponsored by everybody, and we do this out for the love of it. And you're pulling cash in right, left, and centre. You've got gold cards,
discounts on his drinks, queue jumps.
You've got all kinds of things going on. Outrageous, Davis. You're not sharing the wealth. You're not sharing the wealth.
I was on telly on Saturday as well.
You've not done
Football Focus, just to dig a deeper hole for myself.
You've changed.
He's gone big time. Fletch is quiet and humble. Matt Davies has gone big time.
Oh my word. I can't believe this. Where you were to where you are now, based on the influence of Temps and Greg, is astonishing.
I'm still sat in my office with the camera lined up wrong. Don't worry. Wonky pictures behind me. Right, last 10 minutes. We were going to do a big section. I was planning to do it on Montiel potentially coming back, but the Athletic Temps are reporting that it's very unlikely or highly unlikely or something. I must admit that's a source of relief to me. I wasn't keen for him to come back. What about you, Temps?
He made more appearances last year than I realised. I think he played 20 games for Forest, and he did well, didn't he, in the Newcastle game and the Man United game when we had that Nuno bounce. Chris Wood turned into Ronaldo, and all was rosy in the garden across those 2 weeks. But he's not the answer. He's not an upgrade on Nico, despite his illustrious international career, winning the World Cup, winning the Copa America. And I'm just slightly fearful that there's a chance that Nico would be sold. I know we've rejected that Atalanta bid, which was north of 20 million. I wonder if they'll be back or someone else will be back. He's looking for that modern attack-minded fullback and sees Nico as a good fit. In which instance we've got a choice to make. Are we going to replace like for like and try and drop that kind of money on a direct replacement? Unlikely. Or are we going to find a way to pocket a few quid for PSR and chuck that into the war chest for the striker or the midfielder or whoever that might be? So whilst the Montiel rumour has been put to bed by Paul Taylor and seems extremely unlikely, I just wonder if they're seeing a trading opportunity with Nico out for good dollar, a relative budget signing coming in, and a chance to rebalance the squad elsewhere. Because unless it's that kind of thinking, there's no sense for me in re-signing Montiel for this club.
No, I agree. What about you, Greg? What did you make of him last season and the prospect of him coming back until this morning when it was quashed, hopefully?
You wouldn't want him as a replacement for Nico. If it was just kind of shoring up that area for injuries and this, that, the other, then maybe. But at full time, no, I don't think it was right. So it was quite a relief to read that maybe isn't the case going forward. But it was a surprise, and hopefully there's not really any legs in it, because he's not going to be someone who excites you. He's just going to be another number on the sheet, really, like warming the bench and coming on if and when needed. So no, not for me.
No, not for me. It's just a bit too rash for a guy who's won the World Cup. His positioning and his decision making didn't win me over. So, and like Fletcher's been saying through all this podcast, if we're going to spend money, then it probably needs to improve the 11. So, and even if Nico goes, I don't think that improves the 11 massively. So,
I think sometimes, Matt, you can be in a position when you're in a situation like Forest are with PSR that you're going to have weakness somewhere. You can't be Manchester City based on the current rules, because you're not allowed to be. So something has to give at some point. So if you get an injury at full back, you might either have to play somebody out of position in there, or you might have to use someone within your squad that you're not that sure about using on a permanent level. But something has to give while that works out, because they've got to work on the other areas. If they finish the window by signing 2 fullbacks between now and then, and that's the business they do, then I don't think it moves the dial to where it needs to move to. So I think you have to concentrate on what the areas are. And if that means that you have to be a little bit weaker somewhere else to do it, then that might just be the way of it until they change the financial rules, when by that point the Forest owner can be a lot more progressive in the transfer market than he can be now due to the restrictions.
Thank you to Mark Hoskins, by the way, for signing up for membership. Appreciate that. Fletcher's is that all right? You're laughing at that. Right, more money.
Listen, no, I'm glad that Mark's joined as well. Welcome to the crew. You'll find, Mark, in a short space of time that Matt Davies is the one that benefits from this more than any of us on these days. So you'll find that out nice and quickly, and then you can make whatever decision you want to based on that.
Might will get a gold card and a signed Gary Birtles mug within the hour as well, I'm sure.
The signed Gary Birtles going out shirt, I think, is what we're doing this year.
Yeah, Ted Baker clearance sale. Exactly.
There you go.
Now they've gone under. Yeah, a couple of the names just quickly. Temps. Alex Moreno, one we were linked with the Athletic reporting a loan interest in him. Tried to sign him. I think so. Tried to sign him twice. Fallen out of flavour at Villa. Obviously, they've signed Maatsen and they've got Digne. That's the kind of deal I'd be much more interested in than Montiel, to be honest. What about you?
I'm looking. There's going to be some wildcard transfers. I mean, if Tony ends up going to the Middle East, that's a complete waste at the peak of his career. But he's made himself unplayable where he is. I'm not linking him with Forest, by the way. The Raheem Sterling issue, the multitude of players in the reserve team car park at Chelsea. There are going to be some boys available who think they belong top six and find themselves completely ostracised and needing that move. We didn't use the loan market particularly well last season. I wonder if there'll be a last minute deal to do in that regard. Moreno, yes, a good player in a team that's improved significantly around him and finds himself surplus to requirements. So I would advocate for that kind of move. But I just wonder, we've always been tempted late in the window. There's always been someone telling us the window slammed shut, and then we realise there's been a fax sent 3 seconds before the deadline and something random lands on Sports News the next morning. I know there's going to be some high-profile players being touted around at the back end of this, and I just got this feeling that we can't resist. There'll be a surprise to come at some point. But if the question is about Moreno, yeah, I'm keen because he's proven in the Premier League.
Okay, well, let me throw a name out there then, high profile. What about Ben Chilwell, who's completely out of favour at Chelsea, along with loads of other players? Fletcher's shaking his head. Why? I quite like that.
He did a striker that scored 20 goals. I mean, all we're talking about, fullbacks, Ben Chilwell, Moreno. I mean, we've got 2 fullbacks now. And
we're buying one, aren't we?
Where's the fella gone from Bayern Munich who played pre-season? Where is he now?
Richards.
Where is he?
He's going. Well, Paul in the comments asked about that. He's going, isn't he? I think to Olympiacos. Gro's going.
But why? Maybe you've got to have him in your squad, and go and look if they can find a way to do Alex Moreno or Ben Chilwell and a forward and maybe a midfielder, and you make the 11 better, and you've got a potential England player at left back, and you've got a 20 goal. Fine, but we don't know where they are financially. And if it's a case of sell Nico and loan Ben Chilwell, I'm not. It's fine. But then you've got a problem next summer that you've got to go and replace the player that's going to go back. I mean, there's got to be some kind of planning. I just don't think it can be at the behest of what they need. That if I thought you were going to throw a name in there that would excite in terms of filling the issue that they have and improve. Because if you go into the rest of this season with a strike force of another Chris Wood and Taiwo, then I think you're really well stocked, both in terms of being able to cover for any injury and also being in the kind of position where Bournemouth were at the weekend, where they could send 5 players on late to all impact the game. And that was a big thing at the weekend that we should consider. They made changes at the weekend, and those players that came on impacted what they did and helped them back in. And you need to be able to do that in the Premier League as well. And I think right now you've got a lot of doubts over Taiwo's fitness just based on his injury history. Chris Wood's had a fantastic time, but that's it. There is no one else. So if Taiwo's injured, is Chris Wood or bust? You've not really got anybody to come off the bench and change anything. So what do you do? It really does worry me that they're going into this season as short as they are up front. I just don't think you can do it. If you want to avoid being where you were last season and the season before, that's the issue. If you're happy being... I looked at Ipswich. I did Ipswich at the weekend. They've signed Sammy Smodics, top scorer in the Championship last season, for 10 million. They're in for Armando Broja at Chelsea, who we know can score goals in the Premier League. They've got the other strikers, Broadhead and Chaplin, from last season in the league. So just by numbers, they've got 4. Now, they might not be great, but they've got depth. And they've just got promoted. I look at the Southampton group, and they've got depth. The worry for Leicester, Patson Daka's out, Vardy's out. Who scores for them? But you've got to get that. You've got to get that group. You've got to get alternatives. You've got to get different types of forwards for different circumstances. And I just look at it and think they're too short. there. There has to be a focus. And I think everybody would feel better about what this season looks like if there was another one. And ideally, a better one than what they've got now. Someone that is the A side of all of this. Someone who says, well, okay, look, I'm better than Chris and I'm better than Taiwo. They can back me up because I'm going to get you 20 goals. At that stage, you're moving. Then you get away from this. Can we stay above water at the bottom? Then you're looking at the teams around halfway and saying, we can go with you because we're scoring goals like you are. And I think that's the focus for me. For this to become a really successful summer, by the time the window closes, I think that's the area that has to improve. And we can throw Ben Chilwell, Alex Moreno, and any other fullback you want into the mix. If that's a complement to that other position being filled, then I'm all for it. But if it's that or that, then I'd take my licks at fullback and I'd have a look at trying to get the forward player in.
It's a real sad state of affairs, though, isn't it? When you've got one of the best strikers in Europe at the minute in Ivan Toney about to go to Saudi Arabia.
Crazy,
and it's just like, when you look at even the top six, they all struggle for that striker, that one striker that it'd get in most of the teams, like, and it's just, you hear stories of like 300,000 a week and stuff. And I thought it was kind of like a failed experiment, this Saudi league, with players already coming back and some not getting paid. And it's just crazy. He's going to throw away his England career, obviously not that bothered. It's just absolutely mental that a team in the Premier League cannot step up and sign him, whether his attitude absolutely stinks, that can be managed out of him. But it's just crazy, and it shows just how hard it's going to be, because we're not the only ones looking for that striker.
Do you know what? Wonder how sorry, Fletch. Just wonder how we're going to use Robin Sosa. He's obviously coming from a league where he can stand on a relatively flaky centre half and run past him. He's not going to find that in the Premier League, and he's not going to be answering a 4-5-1. So ostensibly, he's going to play off the left, off the right, try and displace one of those boys and show us what he can do. I wonder if there'll be some kind of experimentation against Newcastle in the cup game where we look at him, look at Jota Silva, who by all accounts still has half a chance of going to the sister club in Greece. But we may find that common thing that Taiwo and Chris would have in the physicality, the ability to square up to a centre half, that is a prerequisite for being a centre forward in this formation, in this Forest side. So the guy there that we've seen as potentially a slightly different profile forward, I think is going to end up playing on the wing.
640 people with us. Just before we go, do us a favour and hit like. That would be a big help. Just before we finish, Greg, how are you feeling about Southampton? I feel like it's a really good test for where we are. I'm quite looking forward to it, because it sounds like they played pretty well at the weekend, but obviously against 10 men. Kind of game we can show what we're about, potentially.
Yeah, good memories of it from 2 years ago. One of the rare away win. Yeah, it's really going to show after the disappointment with Saturday how we bounce back and we get something. You walk away from there with a point. It might not be the worst thing, but I'm looking forward to getting down there. We can beat them. They're newly promoted. They're going to have a full house, a rare full house, and they're just going to really go for it. But busiest day of the year for travel on the road, so I was sent this morning, this Saturday. So get down there early and get some of the sea air. I'll be down there. But yeah, it's all full of hope this time of season. I know it's been quite a, not negative, but just this concerns, isn't there? And it's come out in this past hour that we've all got concerns. But you win on Saturday and it's all forgotten about, and we certainly can beat them. And on paper, it's the perfect start, the perfect 3 or 4 fixtures, but we've just got to get some decent points, and that is the great opportunity on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, I still think, I'm not changing my prediction. I think we'll be, I think I said 15th. I wouldn't change it based on one game. I saw lots to like. I just saw the same sort of things that we saw the second half of last season that we haven't addressed yet. So I hope we do. I hope Milenkovic address it. And as Fletch said, a couple of smart signings. You know, I'm still really optimistic about the season in general. Any final words and final thoughts before we go, Fletch?
No, I'm just more cautiously optimistic about what the next 9.5 months look like from a Forest perspective than I was last year. I don't think they get relegated by any stretch. I still think it's going to be difficult for the 3 who came up, and I think that's going to become a more difficult thing as the years go on, that you might almost get this 3 up, 3 down scenario each year, and 17 are pretty much all right. I don't think Forest are going to get dragged into it to that extent, but I also, at the moment, don't think that they're going to pull themselves away as significantly as people hope they will in year 3. I look at the other teams in the Premier League, teams that you would be concerned about, who you might think could drop in there. And I saw a lot of positivity from them at the weekend. People have got concerns about Brentford, but they looked exactly the same. Even without Tony, and Bournemouth scored. They were too good for Crystal Palace. Nobody's got an issue with Crystal Palace this season. They're a good team. And if they do lose players, they'll replace them. The 3 that came up, Ipswich were fantastic for 50 minutes until they ran out of steam. And they went about the game against Liverpool really well. I think that's the kind of performance that gives them confidence. Southampton completely took Newcastle to the cleaners in the second half, albeit against 10 men, but deserved something from the game. Even Eddie Howe said that. So they're confident going in. Leicester look like the easy out for everybody because they've got no players and they're going to lose points. And Everton, I don't know what's going to happen to them off the pitch. But after that, it's difficult to find too many teams that you'd say Forest are significantly better than them. So again, unless they strengthen, I think they'll be good enough to stay in the division, but not quite good enough to get as far away from it all as people are hoping. But I think if they can have a positive couple of weeks between now and the window closing and get some key areas improved, then I'd sit down and say, right, now we're ready to go. But at the minute, it looks very, very similar to me to last season on a lot of levels. And I'm not trying to be Mr. Negative. I'm just trying to be honest. I'm an honest fella. I'm not going to sit here and make it up as I go along. I'd love to be proved wrong. I'd love this team to be 10th or higher at the end of the year and players make incremental improvements. I'd like to see Gibbs White, an England player, by the end of the season. He's scored 10. He's made 15 more. He's the player that we hope he can be. Taiwo's had an injury-free season and he sat there on 17. Milenkovic is reminding everybody of Virgil van Dijk, and what we've booked the system again there, and everybody's fine. Sangari looks like the dominant number 6 that we hope he can be. And all of these things can happen. All of them can happen. And there were certain signs at the weekend in Sangari's case that he's moving towards that. So there is the opportunity for it to happen. But I just don't think they've quite done enough at this point to sit back and say, yep, everything's going to be fine. I still think there are as many questions at the moment as there are answers.
I felt for Palace at the weekend. I can't get through a whole weekend without a shocking refereeing decision, robbing someone of a goal. That Eze one was, really poor, really poor. Temps, any final words / shameless plugs before we go?
Yeah, well, I can't see past agreeing with that. We were 10 points clear of the promoted 3 last season, points deduction aside. And despite the flashes from Ipswich and Southampton, I've written Leicester off a long time ago, and I think they will form the bottom 3. So then it does become, as Fletch said, a case of how can we claw ourselves further at the table. What gives me hope is I don't think we've finished our recruitment yet. I think there will be a striker incoming. I think there's a reasonable chance of a goalkeeper incoming. Let's accept that Milenkovic is going to improve that partnership at centre half, and more needs to come from those players that did just okay last season. So that's where my hope comes from. The assessment's entirely valid, but there's never going to be a quiet end to a transfer window at Nottingham Forest.
Excellent. Right. We shall leave it there. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm speaking to an expert on Paraguayan football, believe it or not, to get more about.
Of course you are. Have you ever? Is there anybody on this podcast that you've not spoken to?
No, not really. Speaking to him this afternoon, find out more about Ramon Sosa, and that'll be tomorrow.
I live life vicariously through you right now. You are having it off on a grand scale since you've got this podcast of your own.
You just commentated on the Euros and the final.
And I'm still living life through you. that says exactly where we are.
Oh dear. Last thing, I haven't plugged this very much at all. Join the FPL League.
Here we go.
What?
There's no prizes.
This bit's just for fun, Fletch. This bit's just for fun.
There's got to be money in it for him.
There's no money in it for me. I'm going to have to find a prize at the end of the season. Didn't have to do it last season because we left the last podcast and started a new one, so I didn't have to give out a prize, didn't we?
Outrageous.
There's the code on the screen. This is all lowercase. E6OYV1. Join the podcast league. Be very much appreciated. And one last shameless plug then. It's the final 6 hours for voting in the Football Content Awards. Lend us your vote. The link is in the description for best Premier League podcast, best content creator, best everything. I don't know. We'll be very grateful.
I'll tell you what now, if there was an award for the best shameless plugger, you'd get gold, silver and bronze.
I wouldn't mind. We've made the finals last 2 years and got nowhere, so I'll take gold, silver.
I'm actually waiting for the day that Greg unveils the Matt Davies montage at the Trent End before one of the games, because banners must be being made at the minute.
Have you not seen as well? He's managed to get 2 different Matt Davises on in the last few weeks. It's become this weird, like, cool. I nearly changed my name just to get back on.
Astonishing. It's just the lack of shame that emanates from Davies these days is quite astonishing.
Well, I look forward to the Wolves game, the Trent End banner. It was a shame not to see one on Saturday, Greg. So I look forward to it. All the Matt Davises who've been on this podcast can be on the banner. Right. Thanks very much, everyone. I mostly enjoyed that. Greg Mitchell, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Michael Temple, thank you very much.
Thanks for the chat, fellas.
And Darren Fletcher, thank you very much.
Thank you, mate.
We shall be back tomorrow, like I say, but if we don't see you then, we shall hopefully see you soon.